Number 4, student testing and assessments. Hey, Phil. All right, chance in the big one.
All right, next we're going to go to issue number 4, student testing and assessments. We'll have, let's first hear from LAO, Mr. Edgar Cabral.
Good morning. Edgar Cabral with the Legislative Analyst Office. This is an informational item just to give you an update on what's going on with student assessments. And before the department talks to you about the details of the individual assessments, we thought it'd be helpful to just provide some context for why we are in the process we are right now. And this is all primarily because of our changes in academic content standards over the last several years. So this began when the state adopted the new Common Core state standards in English language arts and mathematics in 2010. Since then, the state also adopted new English language development standards that are used to provide instruction and support for English learners, and these are aligned to the Common Core. And then also adopted new standards in 2013 for science, which are known as the next generation science standards. And these are standards that were also like the Common Core, adopted and created through a process where multiple states got together with subject matter experts to develop a new set of academic content standards. And so because of the changes in these new standards, we now have a need to update all of our assessments so that they are aligned to these new standards. And that process began in part with AB 484, which was Assemblymember Bonilla's legislation that was approved or was signed by the governor in 2013. And that laid out a new assessment system moving forward, and the state is in the middle of transitioning to these new assessments. So just to walk through very briefly, we have the new Common Core exams, which are being administered right now as we speak in schools. Over the next several years, we'll be transitioning to other assessments. There's currently an English language proficiency assessment used to determine the proficiency of English learners. We are now in the process of building a new assessment that's now aligned to the new standards. We're in the process of updating our science assessments so that they are aligned to the next generation science standards. And then a couple of other specific assessments that are related to kind of smaller student populations. One is an alternative assessment for students with disabilities. So most students will be able to take the Smarter Balanced exams or the next generation science exam, but there will need to be a test for the students who in their IEPs are required to take an alternative assessment. And then there's a primary language assessment that's for students whose English language skills are so low that they couldn't take the English language arts portion. So in the past, there was a standardized test in Spanish that helped assess the students' reading proficiency in Spanish. There will be a new assessment aligned to Common Core in the future. So we're in the middle of all of these changes right now. I think a couple of other things to note. One is the California High School Exit Exam. There have been no changes, but it's one test that we know that is no longer aligned to the Common Core standards. So it's something that is an issue for the legislature to consider in the future. And then also the AB 484 required the superintendent in March of 2016 to submit a report making recommendations on the future of assessments. If there are any other assessments that are currently not in law that should be added, either in the existing subject areas or in other subjects that we're not testing for right now. Like, for example, history, social science is an exam where we do not have an exam anymore. We did a few years ago, but once we've transitioned, we've lost that. So that's just a big picture summary of kind of where we are with assessments. And then I think we'll turn to let the department talk about all of the kind of details of each of the individual assessments.
From Ms. Ramos from Department of Education.
Good morning. Monique Ramos on behalf of the Department of Education. So for our English language arts and our mathematics assessments, we have utilized the Smarter Balance assessment system. So this includes a package of various tools and assessments. It includes an end-of-year assessment that is actually currently underway right now. In fact, as of yesterday, we are on day 39 of testing. I'm sorry, as of May 1st, we are on day 39 of testing. About 1,400 LEAs have begun testing. Around 2.1 million students have started the summative assessment. We have 1.2 million students who have completed the English language arts assessment and about 1 million students who have completed the math assessment as of Friday. So the Smarter Balance Consortium includes that summative assessment. It also includes interim assessments that the state chose to pay for and are available for LEAs to use. And then finally, it includes tools that are available to teachers for a variety of purposes for the assessments. At this time, the state has not completed the adoption of the frameworks for the next generation science standards. So at this point, students are still taking the California Standardized Test, as well as the California Alternative Performance Assessment for grades 5, 8, and 10 in science. The federal law requires that we assess students in science once in every grade span. So that is still moving forward at this time. And then lastly, LEAs have the availability to utilize the standards-based test in Spanish to assess students' reading language arts if they want, but that is an optional assessment for them. One of the assessments that the LAO has pointed out was the California Alternative Performance Assessment exam that was available for students who have significant cognitive disabilities. At this point, we are actually field testing this year the replacement exam, which is the California Alternative Assessment. That is going on right now in the field, and we have decided to assess grades 3 through 8 and 11, which would mirror what we are doing for the general population of students. And that assessment will be operational with the results next school year. Next school year. I'm sorry, I forgot that one in my notes. The next generation science standard, the Department of Education is taking a report to the State Board of Education, making recommendations about what grades we should be assessing, the types of assessments we should be utilizing, for example, performance tasks, so forth. That report will be going to the State Board of Education this summer, and development on the assessment will begin spring of next year. We will likely have an operational assessment in the 18-19 school year. Similarly, for the primary language assessment, a report is going forward to the State Board of Education, making a recommendation whether to proceed with the primary language assessment. That report will also be going forward this summer. An assessment could begin to occur in the 16-17 school year and would be fully operational in the 18-19 school year. Moving on to the LPAC, which is the English Language Proficiency Assessment. So in order to identify English language learners, one of the tools that the state uses and the federal government requires is an assessment. Currently, we have the California English Language Development Test, known as the CELT. That assessment is given in the fall within the first 30 days of enrollment. It acts both as a screener to determine if a student is an English learner, as well as their annual assessment. The new assessment, the LPAC, is currently out to bid at this moment in time. It will have a screener that is available within the first 30 days of the student enrolling, and will then have the annual assessment in the spring to mirror what most other states will do. The request for proposal requires that it essentially that is a paper pencil exam at this point, but it must be able to transition to a computer-based assessment. And we believe that assessment will be operational by the 17-18 year, meaning we will have assessment scores. We should have more information for the committee after May revise on the LPAC, given the timing and the contract process. With me, I have Carrick Ashley, who is actually our new Deputy Superintendent over assessments and accountability, to answer any technical questions.
Okay, thank you.
Amber Alexander with the Department of Finance. As noted in the agenda, the budgeted amounts for statewide assessments will be updated pending the May revision. And at this time, we're available to answer any questions.
Okay. Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes, I have a question. Sorry I walked in late. I hope this topic wasn't broached prior to. But one of my concerns is ensuring that teachers are successful in the classroom, because if teachers are successful, students are successful. And I'm not convinced at this point that teachers have the tools to be successful, thus, impacting student success. And let me give you an example. I think we have, the test bank, where you can go and you can see items. Can you print off that? Can you print the questions off that? So I'm a teacher in a classroom. I get to work at 6:30 in the morning. I'm preparing for the day. I've got a standard I'm focused on. I've gone to the bank and I've identified that's where the bank matches up with that standard.
Right.
And so I want to make sure my students, I don't have access to a computer lab. My students don't have handheld devices. Can I print off that bank? And I'm getting at the real practical level.
Right.
I'm sensing somewhat of a disconnect.
Right.
Between this room and the classroom.
So just to clarify, we have the end of year assessments, which I don't believe you're speaking to. I think you're speaking to the interim assessments, the assessments that are given throughout the year, where teachers can get more immediate results on helping their students.
Okay, I would label those the formative.
Right. Well, some call them formative.
In the classroom, we typically call them formative. Summative being summary at the end.
Right.
Near summary.
So I'm not talking about summative.
Right.
I'm talking about interim or formative. Okay. Some call them benchmark assessments.
Okay.
Any of those. So you're actually right. The reports that you might have heard is that for an interim assessment, a teacher could not right now look at the items before they give those interims. Our contract is actually in the process. We've heard that feedback as well, and the contractor is currently in the process of making a teacher view available so that teachers do know the assessment items that they're giving.
Okay, I don't think we're talking about the same thing, though, and that's good. I think it's good that teachers know what this test is going to look like, because I just back up and look, we spent all this money on in-servicing, and nobody even knew what this test looked like. So that to me is just crazy. But either way, that's water under the bridge. So will a teacher be able to print off the test bank so that they can use it? I'm more concerned with the practical use of this in the classroom and how a teacher uses it, how they have access to it. The STAR was always a secret, what was going to be on that test somewhat. So we're out of that era. We're now into Common Core, and I'm concerned about teachers having the tools inside the classroom to ensure their students are successful. And what do I mean by that? I mean, be able to print up the questions, be able to go to a computer program. Let's say they do have access to the computer lab that day. Can I create a test? I want to use item 1, 3, 5, 8, 9, 10, and 12. So I've created a test for my students, and then I can go to the computer lab and give that test to my students. Are we there yet?
No, we're not there yet. So what is available on these interim or formative tests is there are two types. There's one type that will tell a teacher that's given as a benchmark throughout the year to see how they're progressing. The other one's called an assessment block. So there are interim assessment blocks in which there are kind of prepackaged, if you will, a set of skills, a smaller set of skills that a teacher can give to see how their students are doing on that set of skills. But it's not a cafeteria style at this point where a teacher can pick and choose. Many teachers wouldn't necessarily know which items to package together. So there are some prepackaged items in these assessment blocks.
So could I type in a number? So part of the standard 3.48, and up will come 5 items.
Right. So you have to realize that I have not access to the digital library, so I can't tell you every single thing that it can or can't do. But I can tell you that inside the digital library, one of the other parts, the 3 parts of the assessment system, are some what's called formative tools for teachers to help them teach the standards. And so the purpose of those tools are to do exactly what you're saying, being able to query the system, to get some tools, some resources that will help provide information for their instruction.
So is it the intent, and I know this test is new, but you've got to understand that teachers are going to be judged on this test, and yet they haven't been given the tools to be successful yet. I think we can agree to that. It doesn't mean that you're not trying. It doesn't mean that you're not trying. But is anyone talking to the teachers in the classroom so that they know what kind of tools they need to be successful? Because I'm still seeing somewhat of a disconnect.
Right. Well, it actually doesn't surprise me that you're seeing that disconnect. So first of all, it is new. The digital library is new. The interim assessments are new. We did have a field test of the summative assessment last year, but not but that was all we had. So, and even saying that, the interim assessments didn't come out till just January
30th.
Yeah, and so, and even though the digital library was available earlier, people are just getting into that, and as you know, teachers have a lot to do, and they'll get better over time when they have time to look at it. It didn't roll out until the fall, and teachers are engaged in teaching in the fall. So we expect that all of that kind of professional development, and teachers will get more used to it over the summer, maybe when they have time, when school districts have the time to help prepare. We are doing things like videos and instructional modules and some trainings on how to use those assessment tools, but it's going to take time.
And I think what you're hearing me say is I don't think the tool's adequate. All the videos in the world aren't going to help a teacher be more successful if the tool doesn't meet the needs of their classroom. Right. So I think let me finish here.
Sure.
And I appreciate your responses, and I think you get it, but we're certainly not there, and we need to get there, and we need to get there quick. I mean, we can't wait for an RFP that's going to take 3 years. Right. Yeah. Teachers need, and this should have been done a long time ago, in my opinion, but either way, I'm here now. Yeah. We need to get to the point where the teachers do have the tools and they're easily accessed and they're easily understood. It shouldn't be a secret. It shouldn't take days of training to use this system. It's got to be very, very user friendly. And so together, I hope we can get there, and I hope we can continue this conversation. I hope, I'd like to sit down with you and discuss, my perceptions as one who just left the classroom in December. So this is something that I'm seeing, and it's also something that I'm hearing from teachers on the line.
Yeah, and let me say, I would agree with you. We're not there. Not only is the system new and it has to be learned, but it's just the start. So we've already have a list of enhancements that we want to see added to the system to what it is now, especially in terms of what a teacher can do and use, and not only the digital library. But this is a system, right? With two different kinds of interim assessments. You've got the digital library. You have the summative. How do they all work together? That's something else that we need to help provide some more information for teachers on. And the digital library has to have more materials. I mean, all of the first emphasis of building this system was on the summative, because that was the required part, right? So the rest of it is going to come along, but it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of effort and training.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Hearing none. Public comment on this item. Okay, seeing none. Oh. Of course. Whoa, you scared me. Sorry. Lurking from the shadows.
Where you left off, Bill Lucia with that voice, where was left off was the things that were required to be done first. 60642.6 required that formative assessments be included. They are not included. This committee has an oversight function, and you should know that the RFS and the contract that the board will be voting on this week does not include formative assessments. You've heard the word digital library and interim block assessments. Those sounds like new terms of art. Those are not in the law. The interim assessment, the formative assessment required at 60603M of the Education Code says explicitly that they are to be embedded in instruction used by teachers and pupils to provide timely advice. A digital library does not connote the same thing here. The idea that was just talked about by the Assembly member about something that's a useful tool in the classroom on the fly to be able to pull down standards is exactly what the legislature contemplated, what this committee funded, and what is not being done. It's certainly seen by teachers as a useful tool to be able to have the ability to actually look at the items for purposes of helping kids become more familiar with the items themselves, but also to be able to gauge how they're doing in terms of the instruction. The law requires that, in fact, the state provide these formative assessment tools to districts at no cost. Again, that should have been part of the contract. It's not part of the contract. We strongly encourage you to further dig into this and recognize that the idea of YouTube videos on a digital library is not at all formative assessments. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to proceed, but I wanted to allow, I know the Department of Education wanted to respond briefly.
So interim assessments, formative assessments, essentially this is the same thing. We're using different terminology, but it was exactly what was envisioned when the bill was passed. So that is part of the Smarter Balanced part of the budget, which is in the MOU with UCLA. That is part of the $9.55 we're paying per pupil in that MOU. So it is not part of the contract that is currently before the board. It is in the MOU that the board agreed to in September of this year.
Can I just follow up with that?
Mr. O'Donnell.
And I know you want to move along. So how do we get those tools? If they were built in, I'm assuming they were built into the Budget Act. I think that's what I heard. So how do we get those tools?
So currently they're there. So what's happening is that districts are receiving basically a login, and they provide logins to their individual teachers
Correct.
to log in for the formative or interim assessments, as well as the digital library. So at this point, most LEAs have provided logins. There were some LEAs that didn't provide it right away, particularly because we were delayed. But it's our understanding at this point that the vast majority of LEAs have provided that information to teachers.
Mm-hmm. But you're conceding that we still have work to do to get those tools that were specified apparently in a prior Budget Act.
So it's there. I think what we can do is improve those tools. I think that's our point. It can be more robust and it can be fuller, but it is actually there currently.
Okay. And we'll have a discussion sometime in the future about what that might look like. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, this will be held open. Next issue, teacher preparation and support programs. Okay, please proceed. I think Department of Ed, how we have it laid out.
Okay. Actually, I think we're recommending that the Commission on Teacher Credentialing start with, they were going to do an overview of BITS for you.
Good morning. I'm Terry Clark from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And as your information item says, BITSA began in 1992 as a mentoring program, and it was co-sponsored by the Department of Education and the Commission. It was a competitive grant program, and it provided per-participant funding with a match by the employer, initially $3,000 of state funds with a $2,000 match. The legislative reforms in 1998 with Senate Bill 2042 defined induction as a route to earn the clear teaching credential. And then in 2004, the Lieu Bill, AB 2210, defined induction as the required route to the clear teaching credential. As your item states, in 2006, Senate Bill 1209 did require the Commission to revise the induction program standards, eliminating duplication with any content that was taught in the preliminary program. And those revised standards were adopted by the Commission in 2008. I'd like to give you a little more information past then, more recently. Beginning in 2008-9, the Tier 3 funding allowed the funds to be used for any educational purpose, and so there was no longer per-participant funding. And this is when really our co-sponsorship with the Department of Education had kind of a fundamental change, since it's no longer a grant-funded program. The induction program standards have been updated again in 2013 to better address the knowledge and skills that teachers need to be successful in teaching English learners. So in some ways, BITSA really no longer exists because that was a funding mechanism. All the funds now are in the local control funding formula. Beginning in 2014, the Commission convened 6 task groups to focus on strengthening and streamlining the accreditation system, and one of those task groups is focusing on induction. The task group has been asked to look at and propose revisions to remove the unnecessary burdens for programs and the new teachers while maintain a focus on the in-classroom mentoring so that these new teachers are supported to become effective with all of their students. The task group meets again this week to finalize its revised standards and its guidance for programs. Our plan is then to begin collecting stakeholder feedback after this week, taking the revised standards to the Commission in June for information and hopefully back in August or October for adoption. In the governor's proposed budget, it's asked the Commission to identify options for streamlining and reforming the induction program, and that by September 1st of 15 there'll be a report, and we plan to meet that deadline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Monique Ramos on behalf of the Department of Education. So I was briefly going to discuss PAR, the Peer Assistance and Review Program. So much like BITSA, that program was flexed during categorical flexibility. So it is still a program, but there is no dollars tied to that program. Essentially, the way the program works is when a teacher is struggling, if a district has a PAR program, they're identified and provided a coach or a mentor for 2 years. That mentor or coach is there to help the teacher kind of resolve any issues that they may have, and oftentimes leads to improved teaching. Sometimes it does also involve the struggling teacher being counseled out of the profession, and as it often, sometimes it's not the right fit for that person. We see some of the most effective PAR programs when we see union and management collaboration. Those are some of the better programs around the state, and it really does require all teams working together, both at the site level as well as the district level, to have these successful programs. With me, I have Carrie Roberts, the Division Director of our Professional Learning Division, if you have any questions.
Okay. LAO?
Edgar Cabral with the LAO. I think the item was intended to be informational from CTC and the department. We're just here to answer any questions you might have.
Do you have any comments on the existing framework and structure, and especially in light of the programs being flexed and part of the LCFF and not always available at the district level?
No, I would just point out that a lot of these were specific categorical programs that now, through the transition, now school districts have flexibility to use the funding the way they see fit.
Okay. Department of Finance?
Good morning. Kimberly Leahy with the Department of Finance. I'm here mostly just to present the governor's budget proposal, which specifically, as Ms. Clark already stated, requires the commission to report some options for streamlining and improving the induction program with maintaining a focus on mentoring of teachers.
Okay. Thank you. Comments or questions from committee members? Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just heard a comment about streamlining and reforming. I think it's really recreating. I think the infrastructure for new teachers has been eviscerated over the last 7-8 years due to budget problems. When new teachers did come in, by and large, they were on year-to-year contracts. They were temps. I mean, very, very few teachers have been taken off probation in the last 8 years because, again, they were on those temp contracts and they weren't on a path to seeking or even potentially being able to get permanent status. So that's just a comment. So I appreciate the governor's proposal to add more money to that. I think I'm very supportive of that. Probably should be more money because we do have the coming teacher shortage. It's on its way, and I've lived through one, and it was rough. It was rough what you saw going around you inside other classrooms every day. So those are just a couple of my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? Okay, just maybe to follow up on my earlier question, maybe for you, Mr. Cabral, this is an area of interest of the subcommittee, knowing that certainly districts with the LCFF certainly have the opportunity to do so if they focus on these priorities. There's so many other needs that sometimes this may get put on the back burner. Wanted to ask you if you could provide us recommendations in the May revision process as far as outlining anything that we could possibly do to further prioritize teacher preparation and support programs, especially listed here, like BITSA and PAR, whether or not the framework, a couple years ago, we gave money for, Common Core implementation. If a piece of that, something like that, a block grant or something within the realm, I'll leave it to you. But if you can work with our committee staff and maybe help us come up with some recommendations on this piece.
Sure, we'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Public comment on this issue? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members, Bill Lucia with Ed Voice again. This is broken. There are externalities of LCFF. It's a hiccup. There are a lot of great things with LCFF, but these LEAs that were fiduciary conduits of the BITSA stipends have basically gotten a windfall. And from any given year, from one year to the next, they were serving various LEAs in their region and being the pass-through because it's Prop 98 money rather than non-98 general fund money. And they were coordinating with both the LEA and the partner HEA, the higher ed institution. As you heard with the testimony, this is BITS is required to get a clear credential. So what's happening now is teachers are getting paycheck deductions in order to do the training, or they're just not doing these induction programs at all, and they're going to get their master's degree, and which is both costing the state more money in terms of you get a master's degree, you move up on the salary schedule, and research shows that there's a very low correlation between additional degrees of higher education and effectiveness of teaching in the classroom. So there's a very serious brokenness in this program right now. And talking about the coming cliff of a teacher shortage, we're sending the wrong signal to young people that, and maybe job career changers to come into the teaching profession and say, oh, by the way, you're going to have to go through all these hoops and hurdles to get into the program, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to do a paycheck deduction to have you do more training that isn't even being supported by the state, even though it's a matter of state law. So it's an urgent issue. September 15th is not soon enough. Thank you.
Just one question on that issue, maybe Department of Ed. Earlier we heard, I'm not sure if it was this committee or an Ed committee, about some districts making their teachers pay for it for payroll deductions where others were not. Was that just an anomaly, or was that kind of widespread?
It's my understanding that some districts are, and I'll defer to Carrie.
Yes, our understanding is some districts are charging for induction now, but there are other districts that are providing it.
Is that fair that some are charging it and some aren't? Should we have one system in California?
No, I would say that's not fair.
Okay. And is there anything being done or requested to prohibit that in those?
So there's we have no sponsored legislation on the topic, and CTC has been doing a tremendous amount of work on basically reforming or redoing the system.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bonilla does have a bill that we heard in the Assembly Education Committee, which speaks to this issue and seeks to prevent this from occurring going forward. And I think we would all agree in this room that it is not a fair or a nice thing to have young teachers paying to complete their BITSA program.
Mr. Chavez?
Just a clarification. There is a bill, there's AB 141 going through, isn't there? Says would require all districts to provide beginning teachers induction program and prohibits districts from charging a fee for the program?
Yes.
I thought you said there wasn't a bill.
I'm sorry. I thought I said the superintendent wasn't sponsoring a bill. There is a piece of legislation. I did forget about the Bonilla bill.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was alluded to earlier.
Yeah, we heard about that, and I think everybody here voted for it. So.
Yes.
Yeah, Rocky, we just talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew I had heard about it before. Thank you.
So I'm bringing back
Things
are wrong.
Thank you.
Should have picked it up.
We're trying to move the hearing along. So, real briefly,
Very
and then
briefly,
back to public comment.
The commission did do a survey of our programs, and we did find out that this year, for the information we received, about 12% of the teachers in the state are being charged. It varies across the state. In single district programs, only 5 of those programs out of 82 are charging their teachers. Really, the charging is taking place in the consortia programs, but it's still not completely widespread in the state. But some of the places, they're charging people up to $4,000 in a year. So that's a significant challenge to their salary. And the other thing is there are some people that are not in induction this year because of the charge, and that we don't have really firm data on. But it is going to become more of an issue next year. The program said we're not charging this year, but we really do think we're going to have to charge in the future.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Ron Rapp with California Federation of Teachers. I want to support Assemblymember O'Donnell's comment that the entire system needs to be revised. We hear horror stories from our teachers. We represent 100,000 members. And yes, some of these beginning teachers are being charged up to $4,000. Dr. Cohn, who was the chair of the Special Education Task Force, told a story about that during one of those meetings, that his son actually had to pay the $4,000 to to be a part of the induction process. Also, what we found in our research is there's no consistency in the program from district to district, and there really is very little state oversight or guidance around the program. And so we support the total revision of the BITSA program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Grace Trujillo. I'm a parent. I know I don't have all these fancy titles or anything like that, but one of the key things is about teachers' continuing education. I know CPAs, tax preparers, all these different people always have continuing education. I know you wouldn't want to have a tax preparer that hasn't gone to school in a couple of years because the tax law is constantly changing. I think that goes with school. I think it's very important, the academics and how the structure is run. I think even a financial advisor of what's going on. I think as a parent, it's very important for continuing education. I know for me, for my CPA, it's going to cost me $4,000 just to take the review course. On top of that, the continuing education. I think it goes with all the careers. I actually came here to talk about special ed, but as I mentioned before, I'm just a parent. I had to take care of my duties as a parent, drop off my child, and I got here kind of late. But one of the key things that I wanted to talk about is the commingling of special education with the LCAP. I know it's something that's just looking into, and it's going to happen. But at the same time, I was telling you, if you do that, at the same time, have another special fund to be created for the kids that going to get impact as a result of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, we're going to hold this issue open until the May revise. We're going to proceed now, issue number 6.